Morning, everyone. So, we're going to discuss something Labour are doing at the moment, although it is still related to the Conservatives, of course, very reactionary. So, Keir Starmer gave a speech yesterday, which was, again, quite well received by the people he gave it to. It was charities this time. It was charities. And it's an attempt by Labour to take the Tories on what they think are their safe areas, their sort of divisive culture wars. And it's worth sort of thinking about, because remember, I mean, particularly, so one of the things Starmer mentioned in his speech yesterday was how the Conservatives were now making enemies of like the National Trust. But he also mentioned the RNLI lifeboat. And it's worth noting, for those who don't remember or don't know, I think it was a couple of years ago now. And because, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, basically largely volunteers who, when people are at distress off the coast, go and rescue them in a boat. And obviously, inevitably, this means that sometimes the people they're rescuing are small boats trying to cross with asylum seekers who get themselves into distress. And so Nigel Farage went off on one go. It's absolutely disgraceful. They shouldn't be rescuing these migrants. Basically, what he was saying is we should let them drown. And the RNLI fired back saying, no, we rescue anyone who is in distress. We don't ask for their passports before we decide whether we put them on our boat or toss them back into the ocean. And Nigel Farage went absolutely loopy at them. And it created a huge backlash whereby the RNLI got record donations, which just sort of highlights the fact that, Nigel Farage has a lot of support amongst his core base, which is not a large portion of the population, but he is reviled outside of that base. And you can, a lot of people can be paying attention to the media and think that certain ideas are more mainstream than they are because there's a biased editorial decision to amplify certain views and to suppress other views. So, for example, you have a rejoin march in London, no coverage. You have Nigel Farage saying something about something, and it's all over the newspapers, right? Today, he's moaning about the House of Lords. He's saying the House of Lords should all be sacked. I have no problem with this. It's actually quite disturbing because there are times when Nigel Farage actually says something, I go, yeah, I'll go along with that. I'll go along with that. I don't think you'll like the result, but I'll go along with it. But what's caused this is the fact that the Conservatives, see, historically, they all, politics is unscrupulous politicians for thousands of years have used divide and rule tactics. And the Conservatives are the most unscrupulous of the lot. And they have actually at the moment, I think the US Republican Party can, probably shake them. But they've typically made enemies of two groups of people strategically. First of all, foreigners, we know that they do it all the time. Why? Because they can't vote. So even now, particularly people from, they'll particularly target people from countries that cannot vote in general elections. So that will include, for example, EU citizens. And the second group would be marginalized groups. So the disabled, people on benefits, whether they're in work or not, just anyone on benefits. People from groups who traditionally don't vote for the Conservatives. So again, attacking them, it's like, well, you don't vote for us anyway, so we're free to attack you. Young people are always demonized by the right-wing commentary. If you follow any sort of mainstream news or political commentary, you cannot help but notice that they attack young people, and they have done for generations. This isn't like the modern Tories. This is going for generations. Every generation, the commentary always blame the feckless, lazy, idle youth for everything. Oh, they just want everything handed onto a plate. Where our generation, life was hard, and yet in their generation, they were being demonized when they were young as well by the older generations. It always goes on. But what's happened recently is that hasn't been enough because the Tories have tilted so far to the right that even institutions that are basically supported by people who traditionally would have voted Conservative, like, I mean, the National Trust, think about the National Trust. So that is, for those who don't know, it's an organization that looks after basically our national heritage. They often like buy stately homes or grounds, things like that, where, you know, very, very wealthy families at one time would have owned them, but then they've fallen on hard times. They can't keep it up. So the National Trust take it over. So if you've got National Trust membership, you know, you can spend your weekends visiting these grand stately homes. And there are people that do this. And think about the people who do this on a regular basis. I do it now and then. Think about those who do it on a regular basis. First of all, they've got the time to do that. Second of all, they enjoy on a regular basis going around big old grand stately homes, the likes of which were built by the latter day billionaires, as we would call them today, hugely wealthy people. And these are not socialists. These are not Marxists. You don't have groups of hardened communists going around every weekend wanting to look at the stately homes of our former aristocratic rulers. I don't do that. So we are talking about people who probably tend towards conservatism, and they're attacking them. They're attacking, basically what the Tories are doing now is attack, because we could go down the list. We could talk about the National Trust and the RNLI and Channel 4, and now the BBC. They're now trying, oh, the BBC is biased. Well, yes, it is biased, but not the way you're saying. And but ultimately what they're attacking is Middle England. They're literally attacking their own supporters. They've attacked judges, lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers, police officers, prison officers, you know, border patrol. They're attacking everyone. Everyone apart from, as far as I can tell, the only people they haven't attacked yet is the armed forces. And I may have just missed that. They're even attacking themselves. You know, you've got, I was saying, in response to the latest culture secretary making an ass of herself on an interview, I think yesterday or the day before, saying that, you know, you've basically got half the Tory party, roughly, it's not even a split, but roughly half the Tory party in the media and in Parliament attacking the other half of the Tory party as being too woke. You know, everything's woke. This thing about woke. One Angry Pagan, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. It says, I'm also sure I heard him tear into individualism, scourge of societal cohesion. My own line. Who's this? Rishi Sunak or anyone else? Because it could be anyone. Because all of this started a long time ago. Started under Boris Johnson, really. In terms of the complete lack of strategy. So, as I say, it used to be strategic. These culture wars used to be strategic. They used to attack people who either can't or don't vote for them. In terms of setting, because that's the thing, you set society against itself. You know, you set society against itself, and then it's like there's this cartoon. Oh, I should have found this for an image. There's a political cartoon, years old now. And it has like a king on his battlements, and there's a load of angry peasants there with pitchers and pitchforks and torches. And the aide for the king saying, "Don't worry, sire. All you have to do is persuade the torch bearers that the pitchfork holders want to take their torches off them," which is what the Tories do. It's like you've got all of these groups of people in society that are suffering because of the Tories, and all you do is you persuade one group of people that it's the fault of the other group of people, and that's what they do. Starmer spoke about it yesterday, Phil. Yes. Oh, sorry. I see what you mean in terms of the comment. Yes, sorry. And I have got a link to the speech in the description below if anyone wants to watch it again. But in terms of Starmer's speech, yes. So what he's doing is he's now sort of taking, well, I say now he's taking it on. He has been taking it on for a while. I mean, we pointed out recently, last October, the biggest culture war of them all is Asylum for the Tories. Again, it's retreating into their traditional ground of blaming not just foreigners, but the most vulnerable foreigners, ones who are absolutely never going to be voting. They're never going to get voting rights. So it's really safe to blame them. And so Starmer, last October said that he would scrap the Rwanda bill, for example. He would scrap the Rwanda plan. out of hand. He was asked, even if it works. And as I say, he could have said, and I thought he probably still should have said, well, it can't work. On no basis can it work. But he didn't. He said, yeah, even if it works, I'll still scrap it because it's an expense. Even if it somehow stopped the boats, it would be an expensive way to do it when there are better ways. Oh, there we go. There's that cartoon. Graham's found it. But so yeah, and then over the last few weeks, Starmer has in 2 PMQs in a row decided to talk about asylum, which is not traditionally what I don't think you'll find too many PMQs in the past where the Labour leader of the opposition would say, right, we're going to talk about asylum today, because that's usually the Tories' safe space. But he knows it's no longer their safe space. Not only are they making, by their own measure, an arse of it, but Reform UK are waiting in the wings. Remember, Labour obviously want lots of people to vote for them, but everyone who might vote Conservative, but definitely won't vote Labour, but might vote Reform UK, that is useful to Labour as well. That is absolutely useful to Labour, because everyone who is choosing between Tories and Reform UK that decides to vote Reform UK is helping Labour win more seats. And even if it's not helping Labour win more seats, it might be the Lib Dems, for example, it is at least helping reduce the number of Conservatives in the House of Commons after the election. So what Starmer's been doing with this speech yesterday is he's apparent. So there's been a bit of criticism that Starmer's sort of avoiding the culture wars because he's trying to avoid Tory traps. It's like, well, yeah, that's what you would do. You obviously don't let your political opponents set your own narrative. You talk about what you want to talk about. I find it absolutely mad if people are saying, oh, Starmer's just trying to avoid talking about these culture wars because he doesn't want to fall for a Tory trap, as if that's a criticism. It's like, well, why would you walk into a Tory trap? And some of them are Tory traps, and some of them he won't talk about because why would you? Like, for example, trans issues. We know that Labour governments, all Labour governments, when they come to power, improve rights for marginalised groups, right? The groups who aren't looked after by other governments. In this case, we flip between two governments. And so we know that. We know that Labour are going to improve trans rights. We don't necessarily know exactly why, because they're not wanting to talk about it a lot at all, because that is an obvious Tory trap. Whereas something like asylum, because the Tories are failing spectacularly, because there's a metric, like with trans issues, there's no metric to judge the success or failure of a government. On asylum, there is. So Labour can push at that one. But also, this speech yesterday was basically appealing to people who are moderate, like, Middle England, basically, people who essentially are decent people. They're misinformed sometimes. They generally vote Conservative, but do you know what? They really don't know what's going on with the Conservative government at the moment. And he's basically saying, look, you support the RNLI and the work they do because you're basically decent people. You don't want people to die at sea. You support the National Trust because you want, in fact, he's turning it into like a patriotism thing. He's saying you're supporting our national heritage, whereas the Tories are attacking it. So the Tories who constantly try to say that Labour are attacking our national heritage, when in actual fact, it's not even generally Labour, it's usually groups who are aligned with Labour or support Labour. Should we say liberals? Not all liberals support Labour, of course, but people who when they say, oh, this statue was of a slaver, we should say that this person was a slaver, the Tories go, oh, you're attacking our heritage. It's like, no, actually, we want to inform people about our heritage. We don't want to hide it under a carpet. So it's the Tories who attack our heritage by lying about it. Whereas other groups are saying, look, can we actually just tell people how this came to be? Apart from anything else, if you go to, and they're everywhere, National Trust, stately homes are absolutely everywhere because there's no end of aristocrats that basically ran out of money and couldn't afford their upkeep. These things, if you've ever been to one, they are massive, absolutely enormous. The steps up to the front door are bigger than some people's houses. They're enormous, right? And you can walk around these grounds all day and never get round everywhere. Some of them. Certainly the houses are huge. And they're so huge on any particular day, usually when you go to them, you can only walk around, they can only have certain bits open at a time because they're busy maintaining or cleaning other bits, right? So you can only go around a bit of it. And you just think to yourself, how wealthy would you have to be to have ever been able to build and live in a home like this, even if like centuries ago? So these are, the people who are aligned with this are the sort of the people who want to go around these homes are going around the homes of what used to be Conservatives, Tories usually. But there we go. Let's not. I've got the usual comment here. I've got to come out with one of these. Come on, Phil. Be real. There's some random letters there. I don't know what you're trying to say there. Starmer of the Tory party with red rosette is the best we got for the next election. Let's not act like Starmer is not just a Tory in red. Okay, so Keir Starmer, who took on a large multinational, McDonald's, for free. It's not just that someone paid him to do it. He did it for free. He said, this is a just cause. We're going to do it. He took on the ultimate symbol of capitalism and won. He went around the world getting people off the death sentence, something the Tories are attacking him for at the moment, getting them off the death sentence. He represented striking miners, again, for free, where the union couldn't cover the fees for it, where people needed that help. He gave them that help. This is Keir Starmer. You name me one MP in the Commons. In fact, I'll actually extend it. You name me one MP over the last 20 years who wasn't in government. They can be in the party of government. They're not in government. Who has done anything to rival that in terms of socialist credentials. That is my challenge to anyone who thinks that Starmer is a red Tory. That is what I will say, because I'll tell you who the real red Tories are. The real red Tories are the one who campaign to help Labour lose elections, or who try to force Labour to adopt policies that would cost them the election. Those are the real red Tories, because what they do is they put a red rosette on, but they deliver Tory governments. You name me a single Labour or any other MP, independent, could be anyone, who has done anything to rival that. Literally beating McDonald's, representing striking miners against Thatcher, getting people off the death penalty, actually improving people's lives. Name me a single MP who's done anything to rival it. There isn't any, is there? None of them. There are some good ones, don't get me wrong. There are some with good intentions, but not a single one has got that proven track record of success. But there we go. Just see if there's any other comments. So Azina saying, talking about as a trans person, understand he needs to tread careful line. Just hope that it's an accident, compassion and care comes through once in power. I would say, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. If you're a marginalized group, such is prejudice in society at times that you will always come across that prejudice in society, and the government cannot legislate over people's minds. Thank God, the Tories would like to, but they can at least legislate to make sure that you have legal protections. What I would say is those legal protections will be enhanced, because they always are. This is not like me having blind faith in someone. I don't have faith in anyone. I don't have faith in Starmer or anyone like that. I judge people on what they do, which is why when anyone tries to talk about Starmer, my main defense of Starmer is not, oh, I believe he's going to do this, that, and the other. I don't know, right? It's not just up to him. He's not the king, and I don't know him on a personal level. Okay? I'm basing it on what he's done, because that's what I prioritize. What has a person done? Not what's they said. If we just judge people by what they say, Boris Johnson's a marvelous man. Oh my goodness, he ought to have the Nobel Peace Prize. Boris Johnson, if you go by what he says, is the greatest force for peace and compassion this world has ever seen. Donald Trump would be a close second. But I don't go by what people say. I go by what people do. I don't care if someone holds up a cardboard placard. I care about what they do. Right? Also, as a trans person, things are so poisonous and hateful right now. I just want to get into a party could potentially improve things for us. Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing to say is, it is always a choice ultimately between two types of government. There are four possible types of government that can always form in British politics at the moment. It could change in 50 years' time or something. But at the moment, there are four types of government possible, but you only get a choice of two. So the four types of government possible are majority Labour government, minority Labour government, maybe coalition, majority Tory government, minority Tory government, maybe in coalition. That's it. But you don't have a choice between those four, because there are some people who would choose minority Labour government coalition, but you don't have that choice because it's parliamentary democracy, constituency by constituency. In your constituency, you have a choice. You back either the most likely candidate to win or the most likely to challenge them. That's it. In most seats in the country, the Conservatives are one of those MPs. So for the vast majority of people voting, your choice is between a Tory or a not Tory, someone else, which again will mostly be Labour, but is not always Labour. And that's it. That is your choice. So, and I think even with first past the post, we would get more representative governments. They wouldn't be representative, but they'd be more representative if more people understood that choice, that your choice in this country has been for 200 odd years a choice between a Conservative government and a not Conservative government. The alternative used to be the Whigs, then it was the Liberals, now it's Labour. But it's always been between the Conservatives and not Conservatives. And that is still the situation right now. The only way to break that is to break the electoral system that they created and that they have empowered with, their takeover of the media. The reason why the culture secretary was you say not in Scotland. Actually, no, it is still in Scotland. In terms of the Scottish government, if you talk about specifically Holyrood, no, yes, there it is basically a choice between Labour and SNP. But in terms of the national government, it is still a choice of Tory or not Tory in Westminster elections. It's always a difference between, there are some seats that are between Labour and the SNP, in which case, do what you like, do what you like. But in terms of that national, voting for the national government, your choice is still between Tory and not Tory, as it has been for over 200 years. Conservative government by Hobson's choice. In a way, I suppose it depends on your outlook, because Hobson literally had no choice. Whereas in this case, there is a choice. You can choose to vote for the Tories. I mean, if you look at the voting intention at the moment, people keep scratching their heads and going, how can 20 to 25% of people still be saying they'd vote Conservative? And it's but it's worse than that, because it's it's roughly a third of the population intend to vote either Conservative or, in fact, no, it's not. It's a third of those with a definite voting preference. Because remember, there's a load of people who are eligible to vote and are saying don't know or won't vote in the polls. They're excluded. So there's about a third of the people who say they're going to vote and know how they're going to vote, or say they know, they can change their mind. There's about a third of those people saying they're going to vote either Conservative or Reform UK. Reform UK, in terms of their stated intentions, are even madder than the Conservatives. If there's a worse option than the Conservative Party, it's Reform UK. And yet there are some people going, sorry, the Conservatives are simply not crazy enough for us. I just want a government that cares about its institutions and its people. So here's what I would say. Obviously, I'm very partisan, and indeed this channel is. We're Labour supporters. But what I would say is this. If you think about every British party, because I think I would have to exclude the DUP from this, and particularly Northern Ireland politics is a bit messed up anyway when it comes to UK as a wide. So if we talk about British parties that are represented in Parliament, right? There is only the Conservatives that doesn't care about our institutions and country. They are the only one. All the other parties do care. They just have different ideas about what's best for them. But all of them care. Which is why I would say when people talk, we talk about tactical voting and people say, well, if Labour are on for a big majority anyway, why do I need to vote tactically? And it's like the reason to vote tactically is not to help Labour get into government, because a lot of people who will vote tactically aren't necessarily that bothered about a Labour government. They just don't want Tories. When we're talking about tactical voting, we're talking specifically about anti-Tory tactical voting, not pro-Labour, which is why, if we go back to Scotland, in a lot of those seats, it's between Labour and the SNP. There is no tactical voting group bothered about those. I would say I would prefer people to vote Labour in those seats, but tactical voting groups are not going to offer a tactical voting recommendation because they don't care. They're only offering tactical voting recommendations in seats where the Conservative candidate is a credible candidate in that election. That's the only place they will offer you your tactical vote. And it's so the argument for why would you still tactically vote even if the polls say Labour are going to win a large majority is because if you don't tactically vote, you're basically saying you want more Tory MPs. That's what you're saying. I'm not saying you have a moral imperative to vote tactically. You vote however you like. But if you are arguing that you shouldn't vote tactically because Labour are going to win anyway, you're arguing that we should have more Tory MPs, because we're not talking about tactical voting reduces the number of SNP MPs or Lib Dem MPs or Green MPs or Plaid MPs. It doesn't. It reduces the number of Tory MPs. And not always in favour of Labour. Some of it's going to be in favour of the SNP, because there are some seats in Scotland. This sounds mad. All over England and Wales, the Conservatives are not going to win any new seats. The best they can do is to hold on to as many of their existing seats as possible. I know boundaries are changing, but, in terms of where they're going. In Scotland, the Conservatives could actually genuinely win a couple of new seats. How mad would that be? And do you know where it is? It's because the SNP have fallen away back a bit. And so actually there's a couple of parts of Scotland where the Tories could come back. Not because they're suddenly more popular, but because the SNP have lost popularity. So there would be a tactical voting choice there for the SNP against the Conservatives. So tactical voting could also benefit the SNP as well. It could literally benefit every mainstream party in Britain that's represented in Parliament, apart from the Tories, because that's what tactical voting is. It's anti-Tory voting. Walangi Peg, another £2 super chat. Thank you very much. Society of Service is a good line. Yes. I mean, this is, again, the thing, like the Conservatives, the way I look at Conservatives and the way I've looked at all my life, even though we've got an extreme form of it now, is they openly believe in small states. So what does that mean? They don't think the government should interfere. They say so. That's not my interpretation. That's what they say. You say this to a Conservative. Oh, you believe that the government shouldn't be interfering in how people run their lives and businesses. They will say, yes, that's what they believe, right? So then you think to yourself, okay, so these people don't believe the government should basically do anything. So imagine that you have that belief and you're in government. What are you going to do with your days? Like, you believe it's not your job to interfere, but you're in government. So what do you do with your days? You've got two choices, haven't you? Your first choice is to feather your own nest, work out how you can like turn the situation to your profit. And there's plenty that do that. Your other choice is just to get bored and do something mental, like scrap HS2 or something. So that's really all there is to a Conservative government. Whereas every other party wants what's best for who they see as their people. And they just disagree on what is best for their people. That's all. But they ultimately, I'm not saying every individual politician, you have wrong uns in every party, right? But every party ultimately has a core belief of, no, the government should, to a certain extent, the Lib Dems much less so than Labour, for example, but every one of those other parties believes that it is the government's responsibility to make sure that society works. Whereas the Conservatives are much more of the line, you know, what was it? I don't think this actually was Thatcher. I think it was attributed to her, but I don't think it was her. I think it's a bit of fake history. But this idea of there's no such thing as society, you know, that's what they want to believe in because they don't want to have responsibility for anything. Captain Bart Roberts saying, what do we want change? How do we want it gradually? Well, but that is what most people do want. They don't want a big shake-up. Like people on the extremes of politics, we are in favor of massive reforms. Why? Because we think the country is so far away from where it needs to be. Whereas people in the center are sort of like, look, we just want you to make things work. That's what they want. They're sort of happy with the way it is because they are the majority. So there's, you know, political parties have by and large paid attention to them, the ones who want to win elections. So they're sort of okay with things. They just want things to work. So for the vast majority of people, they want, if they're ill, they want to be able to get a GP appointment. Like my partner on Sunday, carelessly, they almost had her thumb taken off, telescopic, like a telescopic step ladder thing, and it's punctured right through her thumb. Right, nasty mess. Could have taken the whole thing off. She's not gone to A&E because what's the point? Because she'd be there for hours. Whereas if in the old days you could go to A&E, let's say you went on a relatively quiet time, you could go to A&E, be seen within 20 minutes and get patched up and have some medical advice, even if they're not going to do anything major with it, just have some advice. That'd be fine, but you can't. She'd be there waiting for hours. So there'd be no, so she's just going to, if it turns green and drops off, she'll go to the doctor then. You know, so people just want to be able to know if they need to go to A&E or if they need a GP appointment, they can get one. They just want to know that their children in school are not freezing to death, you know, and that the ceiling isn't in danger of collapsing on top of their heads. You know, they just want things to work. They want things to work. And at the moment, they're not working. I mean, the road between the nearest town to me is like Scunthorpe. So the motorway link between Scunthorpe and where I live now has had permanent roadworks on it for 5 years. They're not even doing anything that I can see. I drive past it a couple of times a week and almost never see any work, even in the day, never see any workmen there. I don't know what they're doing. It's been there for 5 years, at least. But there we go. Right, we have completely run out of time there, I'm afraid. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, of course. I have put links, I've put a link to Keir Starmer's speech in the description below. I've also put a link to a Guardian article, which I actually didn't reference in the end. I was going on all sorts of tangents. That's quite an interesting analysis of what Starmer was playing at in his speech yesterday. But thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great day. And until next time, I'll see you later.